Okay.
Yeah, right. So I'm going to try to get across two things, and then there's going to be two questions for you to discuss in groups. So I hope you're in the discussing kind of mood. And then we'll have a bit of a break and different things, and then there'll be another part to what I'm trying to say. So you can all clearly see, and that's no problem. But I would like to take us a little bit further with regard to how we see. So for example, all of you, when you look at me, you probably see pretty much the same thing. Except that some of you may have heard me speak before, so you will see me slightly differently than if you had never heard me speak before. Maybe if you've never heard me speak, but you've heard a lot of people speak at the front, you will, again, have a different way of seeing, have a kind of see with expectation. And if you've never been to church before, then it'll be really open, and it's a bit like, wow, I don't have a clue what this guy's going to say, and why he's speaking, why you have a speaker at the front, whatever. So we begin to see, not just with our eyes, but more with also our expectations or attitudes or different things like that. Now, I thought about this a little bit, and I was just thinking about when we look at somebody and they're trying to tell us something, what are we looking for? Now, I was thinking two things that sprung to mind is, one is whether I can trust this person to what they're saying. So you see how you can see a person, exactly, everybody can see that what I look like, but on the other hand, if you're not sure you can trust me, let's just say, then you will be looking at me slightly differently. You will be kind of listening for things that you don't agree with. You'll be listening in a different way than if you were like, oh yes, you know, I fully trust what is being said here. But the other thing is, so it's partly a trust thing, but it's also the motives thing. So it depends on what you think my motives are that will also probably cloud the way you see a little bit. Now this hit me like a ton of bricks. One time we invited this double glazing agent salesperson to come to our door to sell up, you know, we were thinking about double glazing, getting new double glazing, whatever. And this man, it turns out he was very good at what he did. And what he did, which was genius, and I'm always trying to remember this, he was at the front door, and instead of saying, I'm here to sell you whatever, he said, and here's the words that totally threw me because it's all about motives. He said, how can I help you? And I'm like, what do you mean, how can you help me? You're here to sell me stuff, and I know that. But the way he said, how can I help you? I was like, oh, wow. So suddenly, you know, he was here to help me. So we welcomed him into the house, and he sat around, and he had all the time of day that he wanted. He was in no rush at all. We talked about, you know, my children, my life, my growing up in Africa, everything. He had the whole time of day just to listen, and just any way he could help me. And finally I said, should we talk about windows? Well, of course, by then, you know, I was sold. I mean, I trusted him. You know, I knew his motives were only to help me. You know, he drove a nice car outside, but that was nothing to do with it. It was purely, he was here to help me. And I thought, wow, that was really poignant. And I thought, I must remember that trick. No, sorry, that's not what I'm trying to say. But you see, you know, we do this all the time with each other. I mean, we kind of know each other, but, you know, if you go to a new context, you're kind of slightly judging each other. You know, what are the motives, and is this person trustworthy? But it's not really a big deal. We kind of do it autopilot all the time because generally what we're being sold or told is not really going to shape or change our life. It's not something that's making us think, I don't know how that guy did that. But in the story you're going to hear a little bit later on, Jesus has just taken a man who's mute. Now, the reason he was mute, in other words, he's not been able to speak, is, they say, because of a demon. Now, bear with me. I don't know what you believe about demons or angels, but here's how the story goes. That you've got God, and then you've got us as human beings, and we all are beings because we embody, you know, we're all in bodies. We're all constrained to bodies, aren't we? But there are kind of these beings which don't have bodies called angels. Now, these angels have certain, they're really supposed to be messengers for God. In other words, they're supposed to sort of serve God and be able to do things, but they're not constrained to a body. But at the same time, you know, there's great advantages to having a body, and they don't have one. Anyway, at some point, the story goes that long ago, one of these angels, and he was called Lucifer, which means angel of light. So he was one of the greatest angels that was, because all the angels are unique. They're all different, a bit like us. You know, no two humans are the same. Anyway, one of these angels began to believe, want to receive other angels recognizing it, I suppose, or whatever, they don't really have a gender, it as God itself. So what I'm trying to say is this. God created these beings to have power and to do all sorts of different things. But this one began to say, well, actually, I'm like God. I should receive what God should receive. So there's an analogy in the physical world. You know, you've got the sun, which shines beautifully and brightly, and from which everything you've eaten today has got energy from, right? So massively dependent on the sun. But every night there's the moon, isn't there? And the moon shines in the night. Now, you and I know, hopefully, that the moon doesn't actually shine from its own source. It reflects the sun, right? So in that sense, it's different. But it acts a little bit similarly in the sense that it gives us some light at night. So, you know, these angels were never supposed to be God, but they have some abilities and some powers and all the rest of it. But this Lucifer began to want to receive worship as though he or it was God. And as a result, in the presence of God, this just cannot happen. It's not just that God doesn't like it, it's that it's untrue. It jars with all of reality and nature. And so this angel was cast out of its position, and it took a third of the angels with it, and they became demons. Now, this is a bit of a long explanation, but it's important because demons have a destructive, according to Christians, influence on this world in some different way. And you might think, well, why would God create something that's destructive? Well, the point is God didn't create it. God created angels, but they have free will. And now they use their energy and desire to actually destroy and damage things in this world. So that's a long way of saying this man was mute because a demon was actually somehow stopping this man from speaking, right? Because demons are not allowed to impact us unless we in some way invite them in. Because as humans, we have choice, and that is never violated. But if we invite them in, then somehow this man was mute and he had not been able to speak. And then Jesus basically comes to this man and casts this demon out, just tells the demon to get out of this man. And suddenly the man can speak. So imagine you've just seen that. And going back to the whole thing about, you know, what do you make of people? Well, you've seen something that your eyes are struggling to comprehend. Because this man could never speak, and suddenly he's articulate. He's able to do what he was always made to do, which is speak. And suddenly he's free of that. And so we're going to be... So in this context, let me just read this little... It's just 2 sentences about what's actually said here. So Jesus had driven out this demon. When the demon left, the man had been able to speak. The crowd was amazed, which is pretty obvious. Probably all of us will be like, what is going on here? But some of them said, he's done this by sort of Lucifer, by the power of Satan, he's done, or powerful demons, he's cast out this demon. And others tested him by asking him for a sign from heaven. In other words, they're like, okay, that's an amazing thing. No, I'm not sure. Jesus, if you want us to believe in you, you need to give us a sign. So what you're going to do now, and I hope you're full of bubbling with questions and ideas, is that there's going to be 2 questions on the wall there. Maybe you could put them up actually, and these are only just to kind of, you know, foster kind of conversation and get you to kind of explore these things. Doesn't matter if you never get on to question 2. Doesn't matter if you start at whatever. But these are the 2 different things. Who do you think Jesus is? How did you arrive at this conclusion? That would be one question to look at. And then the other one is, why do you think these people at the time asked for another sign? Why do you think they asked for another sign? And the more you can engage with these questions, the more you'll realize, oh, wow, this might resonate into our own lives and where we're at. So maybe just for a few minutes, have a discussion on these 2 questions.
Okay, so this is from the Gospel of Luke in the Bible, chapter 11, and we're going to just read 4 verses. No one lights a lamp and puts it in a place where it will be hidden or under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand so that those who come in may see the light. Your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eyes are healthy, your whole body is also full of light. When they are unhealthy, your body also is full of darkness. See to it then that the light within you is not darkness. Therefore, if your whole body is full of light and no part of it in dark, it will be just as full of light as when a lamp shines its light on you. Okay, and I can't see the programme because I can't remember, but I believe I'm handing back to John Mark. Okay.
Here we go, that's great. So maybe you could keep that passage up there, please, from the Bible. So this is Jesus teaching, and I find Jesus to be a master teacher. People have found that for 2,000 years. He has this ability to take complicated things and make them so apparent, and then people like me have the ability to do the opposite, take simple things and make them so confusing. Anyway, now let's try to remember what we were talking about in our discussion groups, right? How we see. And we see with our eyes, that's true, but we also see with, like, whether we trust somebody, what motives we think that person has. All that sort of stuff affects how we see. And normally we don't really think about it that much, but when it comes to big things, like a guy who's never been able to talk suddenly becomes articulate, and you're confronted with something that would actually have a big impact on your life if you believed it, then that turns the volume up on everything we're talking about, because you're suddenly thinking, yeah, but can I really believe this guy? And how did he really do that? And so that's why, some of them said, well, he did it by Satan's power, or Beelzebub, he did what he did. And then they say, well, give us another sign, because we want to try to see, whatever. So Jesus basically says, this is how the body works. So just like you have a light that is in a room, it's not necessarily that big, but only these little things are actually providing the light in this room. So our eyes are the only things that provide the light for our whole body and basically our whole life. So the way we see turns out to be so important, because it either fills our life with light or we're in darkness. And it seems to be that Jesus implies that it's one or the other. So because he says, nobody lights a lamp and then puts it under a table. That would be stupid. You have a light to be able to, and then he says, your eye is actually the lamp of your body. When your eyes are healthy, now I'll only teach you one Greek word. This was originally written in the Greek language. And so haplous is the word for healthy there, haplous. And it means sort of single or sound or perfect. Kind of, like when you're very indecisive about something. It's impossible to move forward when you're like always in two minds about something. But when you really know where you're going, you really know what's what, you can really make progress in life. And it's a little bit like that kind of a word, where when your eyes are healthy, in other words, when they really are seeing the way things should be, boom, it has a massive impact on your whole life. But when they are unhealthy, your body is full of darkness. See to it, then, that the light within you is not darkness. So, here's what I want to try to explore with you, and then you're going to have just one question after this to discuss. So, hopefully we're all ears. Because here it goes. You see, in many religions of the world, and what I'm about to say makes I think probably a lot of intuitive sense, but I think ultimately it doesn't work. In many religions of the world, let's think of Islam, for example, in particular. There's this idea that we do good and bad things in life, which we all probably will recognize that we do good things and bad things. And there's a kind of a weighing up of these two things. And if your good deeds outweigh your bad, then Allah, for example, who's the great judge and who sees all things, he will determine whether you should go, in a sense, to paradise or somewhere far worse. So there's this kind of intuitive thing. And that kind of thinking can kind of dribble down into a lot of ways that we think. Because it is good to do good things. It is bad to do bad things. And it's quite easy to sort of think, well, then the point of life is to try to outweigh the bad with the good. If you talk to Muslims who know what they're talking about often, they will say particular things are weighted even heavier than other things. And that will really, it'll up your kind of good count, for want of a better word. So, let's say you've done some bad things, which we've all done. if you work hard at doing good things, and some of those might be like, the fasting during Ramadan and different things like this, it will counterbalance that. Allah sees all things, so you've got a kind of almost like a tally, and then, you should be all right. Of course, there's never a guarantee, but you should be all right. Now, I personally think that kind of system makes some sense in life, and it actually is a good way to kind of also manage and control society, because you constantly, there's a massive reason why people should behave well, because somebody's watching and that guy doesn't miss a trick, and it's all going to add up and it's going to tally up. But here's the thing, and I'll see if this makes sense to you. If you're in a relationship with somebody and that person does something awful, right, and challenges, possibly shatters your trust. I know this is not an easy thing to think about, and I'm sorry if it's triggering any thoughts, but it's important to think about. If you're in a relationship and that thing shatters, and then that person does something really nice, let's say they buy you flowers, or maybe even they buy you a car, right? Which would be a very good thing. And if anybody's thinking of buying me a car, run with that thought. That's a good thought. I once was given a gift by somebody who felt God was just said to them, give John Mark a gift, a financial gift. This guy also had a Porsche, and I said to him, if you ever feel the Lord say to you, the word Porsche comes into your mind, then run with it, buddy, because, I'm on your... Anyway, so that wasn't in the... Don't think that was in my notes. No, it wasn't. So here's the thing. And that might be really nice to receive that good thing, right? And getting a car from somebody would be a very good thing. But if you and I are honest, it wouldn't resolve the issue of why that trust was broken. It would be a nice thing, and you'd be incredibly tempted to take it. And you might even be tempted to say, okay, I'll take it and forget about the past. But do you see how it doesn't resolve anything of the past? It simply tries to kind of overwhelm you with regard to... And I think that might be a bit what Jesus is saying. You see, it turns out life is not actually a tally of good and bad. And the reason is because it's about relationships. So those of you who have children or grandchildren, whatever, if that child did something really bad, they're not suddenly no longer your child. But the bad thing causes a lot of pain and heartache. But you see, if they did something really bad and then they get a first in their degree, it doesn't sort of counterbalance it, if you know what I mean. When we're talking about relationships, doing good things and doing bad things is important, but it doesn't really fix relationships. Does that make sense? And so I think what Jesus is saying is that in the same way that you can't suddenly do a wonderfully good thing and God basically has to let you, kind of into paradise, so it's also the case that if you've done a really bad thing, it's not that bad thing that keeps you out of paradise. It's the relationship or the lack of relationship with God. Because a child could do something awful to their parents, but that doesn't necessarily change the relationship and doesn't stop them being a child. And in the same way, in relationships, we can hurt the other person. And unless that issue is resolved, we might buy them a car. They might like the car. But it doesn't resolve that massive fragment. So Jesus, when he said, the way you see me is everything, was because actually it turns out Jesus is God. Coming down, taking on flesh, reaching out to us and saying, I want to embrace you for all you were made to be. I want to be your brother, your father. I want to invite you into my family. But because it's about relationships, it's not ultimately about how good you've been in life. And also, it's not about how bad you've been. It's about, do you know me? Of course, once we get to know God, then hopefully we live out more and more what he's like. And that definitely should make us people who are more like God and better people, definitely. But that's not where it starts. So, you have a chance for this last question to have a discussion with this. And You know, the point of talking partly is just to kind of help us explore these ideas. So, you know, some of you may well be Christians and you've thought about this for a lot, but it's still good to talk about it. Some of you are maybe thinking about this, trying to decide this, and it's always good to learn through talking. So here's the question. Is our response to Jesus more crucial than the good or bad things we've done? So that's kind of what I've been trying to talk about. If just for a few minutes now, try to explore that idea of, and whether it makes sense, what didn't make sense about what I said, what was blatantly wrong. Maybe you can discuss that, you know. I'm not just saying just because I'm standing up, I'm right. So let's explore this together for a few minutes. And Lord, that is our prayer, and that is how we live victoriously. In fact, how we live fully in this life is knowing that it is in light of you. It is allowing your light into our lives. It is knowing that, yes, what we do is important, but it doesn't confine or define us. You are the one who has given us life, and we live in light of that life. And therefore, we invite you to fill us again. Fill us with your light. And in the same way that the sun provides light, it also provides life. And we would ask that you would fill us with your life, and that we would know what it is to be children, not just of our parents, not just achieving what we achieve in this world, but to know to be children of the living God. So that one day when our bodies give up, actually that's not the light extinguished, because you are an eternal God living in us, and we can look forward to seeing and having life with you and others after this life has finished. And so we invite you again to work in our hearts. Please help us to understand this stuff more, to see you with trust, realizing that your motives are actually good. In Jesus' name, amen.